All right, and we are live. Hello, everyone. Happy New Year. This is Dwight Woods, the Jeet Kune Do Rebel, and this is episode number 251 of the Jeet Kune Do Dialogues. I think this is the second time that I've started the year with my good friend, who I'm going to admit to everybody, I do not do a good enough job of staying in touch with Wayne. And I apologize to him. I apologize to him publicly. 2023 will be different. Right. But it's good to see you, my friend. Welcome back to the Jeet Kune Do Dialogues.
Yeah. Well, happy to be here and happy to see you. Happy New Year to you and to your listeners.
So listen, I spiked my fruit juice in tribute to you with a slap of this.
Well, good for the weather we're having.
I mean, so you just told me you're on vacation right now.
Yes. Usually just Christmas Eve to the beginning of January, we normally take a 2-week break,
Right.
approximately 2 weeks from teaching, because that's the slowest period of at the school in terms of attendance. So nobody really comes out. Barbadians are very much into Christmas and Christmas celebrations, so nobody really comes out to train, regardless.
Right.
So we take that time for ourselves.
Is Queen's Park dressing up still a thing?
Yes, it is. I think I saw a little clip of it recently. Yeah, they're still dressed and go, and everybody goes and show off their finest. Going to the park on Christmas morning is still a thing.
Yeah, I very often in the 30 years, no, wait, 37 years I've been here, I have to explain to people that, because the Hispanics do Noche Buena, so for them it's almost like the celebration is Christmas Eve,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
Whereas for us, if I remember correctly, all your efforts are geared towards being able to go to midnight mass,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then for some of us, not heathens like you, but the rest of us, then then we go back at 5 a.m., I think, and then maybe even at 8 a.m. again.
Well, it depends on how religious you are. Yes, there are those who do the Catholics and the Anglican do midnight mass. The Pentecostals tend to do a early morning service, like
Right.
6 in the morning, I think.
Yeah.
And then everybody congregates at usually Wolves Queen's Park to then show off their finest duds and to see who could, outshine the other as far as
I call
who is
that, you
best
know what I
dressed.
call that? I call that the King Dial Parade. Remember King Dial?
Yes, I remember King Krav very well. Yes, one of our main characters, Barbadian characters, very popular at cricket.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very popular character, well dressed, immaculately dressed for cricket and other special occasions. Yes.
Oh man. So okay, so you take vacation, but you don't have a summer vacation because you run a summer camp, right?
Yes, that's correct. We during the Christmas, we used to do it during Easter, but now primarily for summer, we do a camp which runs. Well, we usually have 2 4-week periods. We tried it a little differently this year because of COVID and the economic impact it was having. So I think we did it like on 2-week blocks this this summer. But usually we have 2 4-week blocks that we offer, and we
Mhm.
run a program from 9 in the morning to 3 in the afternoon for children. And that works. That's been working pretty well for us over the years.
Yeah. Well, I mean that is a staple of a lot of the, I would call them Taekwondo schools here. I mean, they're guys who pretty much make the money that they're going to make for the whole year. They make it in summer camp,
Yeah.
and then. But I got to tell you, I was never able to pull that off. I don't know how you do it, because you pretty much are the one, those 6 hours, Monday to Friday, all those weeks, right? It's you.
Teaching primarily, I teach a large portion of the classes, at least the martial side of it. But
Right.
Petal does the arts and crafts, and she deals with the arts and crafts side of stuff because obviously the kids don't just want to do martial arts all
Right.
day. So there
Right.
has to be some balance. We try to strike some balance. I tend to want to do all martial arts, but we found that having a balance between
Yeah.
STEM, arts and craft, baking, she throws all that in, and I teach the martial
Nice.
arts, and it kind of balances, and the kids seem to love it. And they come back. We have some kids who've been coming 5, 6, 7 years consecutively.
Nice. Who's in charge of the water sports?
It used to be I would oversee it and Petal would decide. She would add elements to it. For example, there was a year she brought a foam machine and added that where the foam all going all the kids were going crazy with that. So we try to keep it interesting, and
Right.
add different elements that would keep the kids keep them interested and keep them motivated. So
Yeah.
yeah, we try to add some new element or to expand on something that we've been doing already
Right.
to make it exciting.
Like I said, man, I really admire what you do, because like I almost every time that I talk about you, I mention to people that I think that you've done something there in Barbados that I don't know that I would have been able to to pull off. Because you, if I remember correctly, you were the first person to teach martial art full time, right? You're the first person on the island to make it a career, right?
One of them. I don't know if I can't say for sure the first, but probably the first who was based here primarily because I remember Liebert Matt. I think Liebert may have done it full time as well, but he would travel to the UK and stuff part of the year, so it wasn't like he was
Oh,
based
okay.
here fully, as was I. But
Right.
I would have been one of the first, definitely, probably the first person definitely to open a commercial school in terms of having a physical location that taught martial arts. Um, um, that would have been me, I
Yeah.
believe, because I think their Wushu school in St. Philip was built after I started teaching commercially in Bridgetown. So from that perspective, in terms of having a physical location and teaching from a physical location full time, that would have been me. But in terms of teaching itself, I think Liebert Matt might have been the first.
You know what I just thought of? Okay, wait. So I'm hearing myself again. So
That might be my internet connection. I don't know.
is that what it is? Okay.
I can only assume because there's nothing else around
Right.
that
You
should
know
be
what I
giving
just thought?
feedback.
You know what I just thought of?
Mm-hmm.
We should have done what Sully Welch did and moved the camera to show your setup. We should have done
Well,
that.
we should have done that if we had if we finished cleaning for the new year. But right now the school is a mess. Where, as you can hear my cough, I've not been well. Petal has not been well, so we're behind on getting to school. So we're right now in the process of getting the school ready to reopen on Monday. So everything is a mess right now.
Okay. All right. Well, like I said, I appreciate your taking some time out for me. What's the COVID situation like in Barbados?
Well, a lot of the emergency directives have been lifted, so we're not under the emergency directives anymore. It's business as usual, but with mitigating factors. Everybody's supposed to do their own mitigation as far as COVID is concerned. It's it's winter period now, so this is our tourist period. So it's our tourist season. So we have a lot more tourists coming in. So right now things are starting to peak again. We're seeing a rise in COVID. Of course, you have also flu. There's a rise in flu as well, and what's the other one? The RSV that's creeping up as well. But it's not at the alarming state right now. It's being managed and mitigated pretty well. So people are pretty much doing what back to usual. You're not required to wear a mask, although some of us still do, like I do.
Right.
So you're not required to wear a mask in public anymore. Social distancing is not required anymore. Hand sanitizing, all those things are no longer a requirement, but individual businesses can still implement their own protocols as far as what you need to do in order to enter their establishment. So for us, for example, we still, which is something we have always been doing in terms of martial arts. We still sanitize equipment when we use it, but that's always been a staple of martial arts and gyms anyway. Masks are optional, so those who wish to wear can. As I said, I do. Those who don't have to. And we encourage our members to wash their hands when they first come and when before they leave. Just basic general hygiene practices that are sensible hygiene practices. That's what we try to employ. So other than that, there's no longer a vaccine requirement to come. You don't have to do COVID testing anymore to come here to get it. So all that stuff has been removed. So people are coming. The only challenge is that because of such the lockdown was so tight, when the restrictions were lifted, people went from one extreme to the other. So it's like, it's like totally oblivious to the fact that this COVID virus still exists and can still impact. So when it lifted, you saw a spike initially because people started to, congregate very close together. They're, weren't wearing the mask anymore and so on. And so there was a uptick in it, and then it kind of plateaued again. But now with the intake of tourists and stuff coming in, it started to peak again. Okay. But I think that we'll ride that wave because I don't, the term COVID fatigue is being thrown around a lot, and that really seems to sum it up. People are very tired of all the challenges that COVID has brought. And it has been a struggle, particularly for small businesses. Right. It's a miracle we're still open and functioning to be honest.
I definitely wanted to talk to you about that. Now, but during COVID period, you didn't get sick, right? You didn't come down.
No, I didn't.
Thank God.
I didn't, to my knowledge. I say this, Pedal argues differently. I may have come back from Thailand with it. I'm not sure. I never got tested, so I don't know. And the truth is, whenever I travel, I always get sick. Anytime I come off a plane from long travel, I get sick. It's just that this particular flu, I usually get over the flu in like 2-3 days. When I came back from Thailand, it took me like about 9 days to 2 weeks. So it lasted longer than normal. But I wasn't, I didn't have issues with breathing, with shortness of breath or anything like that. It was just a cough. It was just a cough that I had. So I may have had it. I don't know. But during the COVID period, no, I never. To my knowledge, I never had it. But again, I was always masked up. Right. I'm overcautious where certain things are concerned. So that was. Plus, Petal wouldn't allow me to do a lot of things. Because of her medical background, there are a lot of things that she would not allow. I can sleep next to her if I went around people with unmasked and stuff and so on. She wouldn't have it. So,
damn.
You know what they say, happy wife, happy life. So I told the line. I was just gonna say that. I told the line, and it worked out well for me in terms of not being seriously ill. And the good news is for those 2 years, for the first 2 years, none of our students either. Nobody, none of the students here caught it. And those who did catch it later on didn't catch it here. They caught it because they they relaxed in environments where they shouldn't. Like the school relaxed, the school environment became lax, and they didn't, and they were around kids who weren't wearing their mask or wearing it properly and that sort of stuff. And thankfully, they caught it in periods usually where, again, we were open. So like last Christmas when we were closed, a couple of them caught it during that period. So by the time we reopened, they were recovered. So we were, again, blessed, fortunate. I don't know what you want to call it, but we got lucky.
I was trying to pull up a picture. It is my favorite picture of me, you, and Sifu Dan.
Yes, I know. Somewhere up here behind me.
You have your copy of it?
Yeah, if I tilted the camera up.
Which one? Yeah, that one, right?
Yeah, this one. I don't know if I can get it much higher to show, but it is the angelic Sifu Dan.
Right, that one, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So if I do
you
it,
see the halo with the halo around him?
Yeah. Interesting, right?
Yeah, that's.
But one reason why I love that picture is I think that's when you and I were at our best looking, I think. I don't remember what was going on with me, right? But when I look at that's when you and I find that's when we look most like twins, right? and I think that's when we were at our most handsome. You didn't get sick on that trip, right?
No, it's always on the way back home. When I return home, I think it's from inhaling so much of the air from the plane. So usually it's not usually when I'm flying out, it's by the time I'm flying back, having been in that the cumulative amount of time I've been in the aircraft, that affects my illness. It's usually when I come home that it happens, which is good because I don't ever want to get sick while I'm in the US.
What, you don't trust our health system?
I don't trust that I can afford your health system. Let's put it that way.
Right, I hear you.
So I prefer if I'm going to be ill, I prefer to be ill home where I don't have to pay for my health care. Do
you remember what year that was? That picture is. Do you remember
honestly, no. I know I can remember the things that happened around that time, but that would have been probably around. Is it written? No. 2000. That would have been maybe around 2009. I remember that was Sifu Dan had brought Eric Paulson, Sensei Eric Paulson, with him for that seminar.
Really?
Yeah, that was a seminar that's over there by
that was at
West Carroll. That was back when West Carroll had just opened his gym.
That was World Gym.
And we did it, and we did the seminar there, and he brought Eric Paulson, and they did he did primarily it was Japanese shoot wrestling. A lot of CSW and Japanese shoot wrestling was a part of that seminar. But the actual year, I'm terrible with dates, but interesting enough, I love history, and I can remember history in terms of dates if I read stuff, but in terms of dates for myself, I cannot date things for myself. I can't.
I'm going to tell you. Okay, so this is so stupid, but you mentioned history, and you and I both went to Harrison College, and I was so terrible at history. Wayne, the only thing I remember two things about history. I remember that the Battle of Cornwall was 1066. No, Battle of Hastings was 1066, and the history teacher was Captain Hook. That's it.
Wow.
That's all I know about history.
Okay,
You
my
know?
European history is not that great, although I must say that because of my research on stick science, I am delving into that aspect of it more. I was more into Caribbean history. By the time
Right.
we did what European history in first and second form, and that was Henry VIII and Cromwell, and you know
Man.
the change
Yeah.
from England going from monarchy to its Westminster system and that sort of stuff. But
Uh, I'm the most disgraceful person. What would you call ourselves? Collegians?
collegian, yeah.
Yeah, I'm the most disgraceful collegian because I didn't even bother to do as well as I should have at O levels. So
Well, that is a common plight of some of us. But you know, that's because we walk a different path. That's how I look at it. When you recognize early, you know,
yeah,
that your path is not the same as most, and you know, you're not a follower but a leader. Or as I say to my students, you know, you're either a shepherd or a wolf, but we're not
mhm,
sheep. So
right.
so that happens because if you look at it, a lot of Barbadians who are well recognized in the world outside of the academic field are actually Harazonians who delve off. If you look at Spice Band, which became a very popular group,
Mhm.
those were Harazonians. Nicholas Branca, one of the best best known bass guitarists in the world, he's also Bajan. He's also Harazonian. And there are so
Yeah.
many others. In recent times, Adrian Green, Brian Marshall, all these are guys who went to Harrison College, but they didn't stay on the prescribed path.
The
Yeah.
academic the academic world.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
recognize for
Yeah.
whatever reason that our path was different and we chose to walk a different path. But you know, that path, having chosen that and opting to do that, we've actually created opportunities for others. We've expanded the scope of what would be viewed as traditional success in Barbados. Because
Mhm.
for a very long time, you said, I'm a musician, I'm a martial artist, um, whatever. The next question they would ask you is, but what's your real job? Remember
Right.
that?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, well, what do you really do?
Yeah.
But now you can say, well, I'm a musician. It says, oh yeah, Rihanna. Yeah, you know, everybody knows Rihanna, who Rihanna is now, and you can't say, well, she's unsuccessful. And before her, Alison Hines, before her, Edwin Yearwood. Um, and so there are a lot of divergent paths that have been trailed. Harazonians have been trailblazers outside of the academic realm. And maybe if not for them, others would not have had the confidence
Right.
to take that route and try to
Si-
expand and expand themselves
Since you
beyond
mentioned
academics.
Rihanna and Harrison College, right? You know who Miles Millington is?
Yes, Janice's son.
Yeah.
Janice Middleton. Oh, yeah, our music teacher, because for a very long time she was a music teacher at Harrison College.
Yeah.
Fun
She,
fact:
what?
Rihanna's cousin trained with me for many years.
Oh,
Actually,
fun fact.
her family, because her cousin's son, her aunt, they all
Yeah.
trained with me at one point.
Okay. Fun fact. Rihanna grew up on Westbury New Road, where I used to live, which
Yeah.
is now called Rihanna Drive.
Yes. Correct.
Now, imagine that. Imagine that. They had a choice. They could have renamed it Dwight Woods Drive or Rihanna Drive, and they went with Rihanna. What is up with that?
Well, she's prettier.
I'll give her that. I'll give her that. I saw a picture of her, like, I guess like when she was like 16 or 17 or whatever. I was like, man, I wish she was in my age group. I would have definitely checked that on West Berkeley Road for sure.
Yeah. Well, she isn't
You
doing too
know,
bad for herself. Yes.
not at all. All right. So listen, so talking about paths and what have you, right? Can you see that picture?
Yes.
You recognize that?
August 25th, 9, August 25th, 1985. That date I know for sure. Can't forget that date. I believe it was a Sunday. I
I think
believe
it
it
was
was
a
a
Sunday,
Sunday. Yes.
right? Okay.
At
All right.
Rock
So
Cultural Center.
right. So I'm gonna tell this. I'm gonna recite to you somewhat the way I tell the story of that event to people, and you tell me um, if I get it wrong. Right. So this part you wouldn't know about, but it's 1985. So I've been with Inasano for it's August of '85. So I've been with Inasano for 2 years and a month. Right. I
Mhm.
mean, like almost literally because I started with him Sunday, July 24th, 1983, right? Okay. So, as you might know, that was peak JKD. I'll mouth the bad word. That's when we used to behave like real JKD jackasses, right?
Mhm.
So they're setting up the groups. It's just me and Glenn. They're setting up the groups and they're like, okay, well, we only want the heads of the groups to go up to be introduced. I said to the guy, it was a Shotokan karate guy, because I think they were the ones who put it together. I tell the guy, I go, well, I'm the head, but he's the brain. I can't really go with I can't go without him. He's like, what? I go, don't worry, don't worry. Then he's like, okay, so what Dan are you? Because they don't want to put a second Dan in front of a third Dan when the people are going up to be introduced, right? So he comes to
Mhm.
me, goes, what Dan are you? I go, Dan? I go, no, Dan, that's my teacher. I'm Dwight. He's like, what? I go, don't worry, I'll just go at the back.
Mm.
Okay. So I'm watching everybody, and they got what 10 people in their demo team. So you got a guy on the microphone and he's saying what the people up on the stage are doing. Now I'm watching all of this, and we never used to rehearse anything, right? You didn't
Yes.
practice anything, right? Okay, so I'm watching, and then it's our turn. So I go down, I'm on the mic, and then I jump up onto the stage, and then I jump off the stage in front of the crowd, and I go, "Can everybody hear me? Okay?" That's how I remember it. Am I right?
Pretty much. I remember that.
Okay.
Yes. Pretty
Yeah.
much because that was the probably the most distinctive difference in demonstrations on that day that I remember. The fact that you actually engaged with the audience and talked and explained what you were doing and why you were doing. That's what attracted me to you as a teacher and to JKD, knowing that that's where I wanted to go. Having that reference, I only had one reference to JKD at that time, which was a magazine my best friend had given me.
Mhm.
And all this talk about this guy called Bruce Lee that people were seeing on in the cinema, which I had never seen, I hadn't seen up to that point.
Uh,
So you explaining what you were doing and why you were doing it and demonstrating it, which was so different to what everybody else was doing, they were just coming up and demoing. You would have somebody talk, as an introduction, and then they would do their whole routine.
right.
But there was no, well, what is this? There was no explanation of what it is I'm seeing, and there was no explanation of why it is you were doing what you were doing. So that was what was distinctly different for me. And that's what sold me on training with you, because what you did, you explained and it made sense. And I could see the functionality of what you were doing. And I could marry what you were saying with what you were doing, which is one of the biggest challenges I've always had with martial arts over the years. In that what they show you or what they teach you, and then what they expect you to do and perform in the actual time for sparring or fighting occur was very often so different.
Yeah.
You know, but what you demonstrated, what you explained, married. And then when I went to learn, I was learning what you were demonstrating, and it was working, you know, and
Right.
that was a big thing. That was a big thing for me in terms of where I was, because up until that point, up until that day, I had been going around checking other martial arts schools, trying to determine where I was going to join. And I pretty much settled on at Karuz Kempo Karate
Right.
up until that point, because of all the schools I visited, what he was selling in terms of art and philosophy was the closest to the Jeet Kune Do I was reading about. Um, you know, one thing he said that I've never forgotten, which was that, you know, your technique should retract twice as fast as it goes out. You know, it should come back twice as fast as it goes out. I said, oh, that makes sense. So I've never forgotten that. So I said, okay, well, maybe this is what I want. But then I saw your demonstration, and that I was sold.
So I hope. Do you know J. Anthony Joseph? Do you know Jared Joseph?
Not personally. I met him, excuse me, I met him once, but I trained with his student, Dale Brunton, who I think you would have met too.
Yeah, I know Dale.
Dale did Togakuriru Ninjutsu, and he did the Dawan Fa with Gerard Joseph. So
Right, okay.
when he came to Barbados, he was in Barbados for a couple of years, and I trained a couple of months while because he started a ninjutsu program at Harson College in, I can give you that date, 1988. So I trained with him then, and he had been mentioning Dao Guan Fa to me, but he wasn't teaching that. That was his secret, you know, his secret system that he wasn't going to share. But then a couple of years later, he had brought Gerard over for a seminar, and he invited me to come and to observe it. So that's when I met Gerard.
Well,
But
if
a brief encounter.
Yeah, if G's watching, he'll appreciate what you just said about what Carew said about retracting faster than you extended. All right, so here's another thing about the cultural event thing. I recall that I did this. I went like this, and I asked one group, "What do you call this technique?" And then I went around the room asking everybody what they call that technique. Am I right?
I cannot remember I remember something of that line, but I cannot remember the specifics. But I remember you questioning, yes, something of that sort.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Because because as more and more time passes, my catalog of stories, I got to be I got to be sure that they're accurate, and that I don't need to put a fresh spin on them. But that's how I remember, and like I could identify from faces in the crowd who was from what school, So there was the rising block, the upper block, the upward block, the high block, the head block, all that stuff, right? So then afterwards, you came up to me. And I said, well, you got to get up to Rendezvous Gardens, and
yes,
and that was it, right?
Well, that was most of it, but yeah, I called, we spoke, like a week later I came, and then of course I asked what the lessons were. You said it was going to be X dollars, and of course my head went like, because I was 16 years old at the time, going to school. Right. My parents were not paying for my martial arts lessons, so
join the club.
I had to raise the funds. So it's like I can't manage that. And you said the most important words to me at that time that I have never forgotten. It's the reason why I am still here and involved. It was, pay me what you can afford.
I said that?
Yep.
Well, I was just in it for the money. I was characterized many years later as, that Dwight Woods, he's just in it for the money.
Well, don't worry. I've been characterized in the same way. So we're both in the same boat in that regard. But
You're the
I've never
standard
forgotten
bearer.
that, you know.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why I could train, because I couldn't afford the cost of the lessons, and there was no argument as to the value of it. Certainly, it was worth what you were asking, but because I had no means of I had no one funding it, I had to find my own way of doing that. And thankfully, you facilitated me, and I was able to pay a percentage. I won't go into what percentage or whatever, but a percentage of what was asking, and I became the most diligent and devoted student at that point from that time on.
I think ultimately you were the only student.
Excuse me, not always, but
Right.
sometimes.
So
I benefited from private lessons in essence in many cases. In many
there you
cases,
go. Right.
you
I
know.
funded my Wushu Quan career, right, which I think was about 6 months, if that long, right? I funded that bagging groceries at downtown supermarket.
Yeah. Well, me, I skipped lunch. I used my lunch money to pay for my lessons.
Ah,
See,
wow.
and I use the excuse because at that point, and I got lucky and started working on weekends on a video store not long after, but there was a
Okay.
movie with Chuck Norris, I believe it was called Men in Black,
Yeah.
where in the movie he says, well, I don't do lunch, you know, and that was my excuse to skip lunch and use that money to pay for lessons. Well, if Chuck Norris could do it, if Chuck Norris could do it, I could do it, you know?
Yeah.
And
Because
interesting enough, that has held me in good stead now, because now I'm at the point where I don't eat before 10 o'clock. Um, Intermittent fasting is a big thing now, and for me that works. So
yeah.
you know, my body got used to the idea of eating within a particular period of time.
What time do you finish eating?
Unfortunately, very late. Sometimes it can be 12, it can be 2, but I don't go to bed until sometimes 4 or 5 in the morning.
I don't know how you do it.
I shouldn't do it, but that's just how it works out.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, when I look at the videos on your page or on Instagram or what have you, you know, and I see how much teaching you do, right? What is the secret to your not having burned out?
Passion, I would
Yeah.
say. I mean,
How do you maintain this passion after? I mean, I understand maintaining passion for somebody like Petal, because that's easy. How do you maintain right? How do you maintain passion for martial art when
well,
it's just you? You know what I mean?
this is how I look
I
at it. I am forever the student,
Mhm.
and I suck. That's how I look at it. You
Okay.
know?
Okay.
That's how I look at it. See,
Right.
as a
That's funny.
student, I suck. Relatively speaking, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So for me, teaching was always the means to an end. It was not the end in itself. I taught because I had to teach, not because I wanted to teach. Right? I needed training partners. There was nobody else doing what I was doing. So in order for me to advance, I had to get other people interested and teach them what I knew so that I could further myself. So that was the initial motivation. And
Right.
that has always propelled me forward to get people to a level where they can challenge me enough that I could go further.
Right. Hmm.
And then the teaching became a part of the learning process. So the better I was able to teach, to convey, to get people to understand, to get them to their best selves, the better understanding I actually had of what I was doing, what I was teaching.
Mhm.
And at this stage that I am at now, I'm only at stage 3 of my JKD development, in that I am now at the hacking away, the inessential stage. So I'm not even anywhere near where I think I should be, because I'm at the point now where I've trained enough and been exposed to enough disciplines that I can start to see, well, yeah, I can see how I can now, throw this out, throw that out, bring this together, and so on. So for me, that in itself is exciting, because it's at a point now where I'm at the point and the stage now where, I'm back at where, as Simon Law was saying, my body is not up to the standard of what my mind wants to do. You see, that Simon Law quote, because now I'm at the age where things that I could do easily in my 20s and 30s are a bit more challenging to do. I can still do them, but does it make sense to do them? I can do them.
I don't know. I saw you doing some spin crescent kicks the other day. I mean, look fine to me.
Yeah, but if from a functional perspective, if my life was on the line and I hit somebody with that kick, would it do the job? So that's how I have to assess what I'm doing, which is, again, maintaining that real world element to the training and the JKD. This is something I keep telling my students that I have. You see, there's a lot of material that we have. There's a wealth of material that we have been exposed to.
Mm-hmm.
Do we need it all? No, because the process was never about accumulation. It was always about distillation. And so how do I take what I've been exposed to and use it to express myself, honestly, not lying to myself, right? In a way that I know that if my life were on the line and it was a question of today I live or I die, this is what I'm going to do, and this is what I can pull off. And this is what I know will work for me, because there's a lot of stuff that I love to do. And in the classroom environment, it's great. And I love to do it in the classroom environment. But I constantly tell my students, you're not training for the classroom. You're training, well, let me rephrase that. My JKD self-defense oriented students, this is what I say to them. We're training for this, we're not training for the classroom, we're training for the street. So when I teach you stuff, I need to know, and I have that you can pull the stuff off, and you need to know, more importantly, that you can pull the stuff off, because I will not be there when it happens. So I will be there to tell you, oh, no, you should do this or you should do that or whatever. You need to know. So a lot of what I do at this stage is about, for me, that distillation process. Okay, you need to know how to kick. Well, there's this type of kicking as you can do in Savate. There's this type of kicking as you can do in Muay Thai. There's this type of kicking as you can do in Pali, and so on. But do you need to be able to do all of them? No. You just need to be able to have an effective kick that does not put you in a vulnerable position and has the ability to put that opponent on the ground. So which one of those work for you? Which techniques work for you to achieve that and accomplish that?
Right. Okay. So give me an example of a formula for that distillation. In other words, they're not going to know which kicks work for them unless they're exposed to a variety of kicks. So as the instructor, you're the one who has to, so to speak, choose the kicks to which they will be exposed, right?
To some degree, but everybody has their own inherent expression. I'll put it that way. And the key is to understand that and to then refine that. Excuse me. So I have a student of mine, a student here currently. I won't call him names just in case he watches this episode. But he'll know who I'm talking about when I mention.
Okay.
You're familiar with the term bull rusher.
Yeah.
From the kid, right? He just charges head first into everything, no matter what you tell him. You know, because that is that psychologically, that is his mindset, and physically, that's what he thinks. He thinks if he charges forward, he stands a better chance of overwhelming you. Well, of course, when he does that, he gets clocked all the time. So I'm so frustrated by whatever, getting blah. What do I do? Well, I said, well, you need to temper that charge. You can't just charge in there, blindly. There's a time and an advantage for doing that. Like a straight blast is bull rushing, but the bull is not blinded, right?
Yeah.
Excuse me. So there's that. So getting him to understand it, not to dissuade him from having that aggressive mindset, because there's nothing wrong if you can control that aggression. You can use that aggression effectively.
Right.
The last time he sparred, interestingly enough, I limited what the options, because again, remember, for us, sparring is a tool. All right. It's not an ego-driven activity where to see who can hit and hurt the other the most. It's an opportunity to try things, to experiment, to see what works, what didn't work, why it didn't work, and so on. So the last sparring session we had, I put the usual limitations. You can only use your hands versus hands, feet versus hands, feet versus feet, hands versus feet, and so on. Lead versus rear side, and blah blah blah. Usual things that we do. And he discovered two interesting things. One, that he actually prefers to kick, and he's more comfortable at kicking range because of that limitation. So now he isn't charging anymore, and we have worked on defensive methods. I've shown several different ways to defend against the hook kick. So at one point we were sparring the hook kick. The opponent can only throw low line hook kicks, middle line hook kicks, high line hook kicks. Now he can go high and middle, he can go high and low, and so on. And we worked the Bong Gurk series, we worked the Lock Gurk series, we'd worked Decollage from Savat, and so on, different options. And then they were to try and experiment and see what came out of them. He pulled off the Bong Gurk naturally. That and the shield, because the complement of the Bong Gurk is a shield tuma. So he started to pull those off. He couldn't, the other things he couldn't, but so now he's experimenting and he's discovering what works for him. And when he did that, then he followed up with his hands. Then he was more successful, because after he got his kick in and off balance his opponent, now he could go in with his hand combinations more confidently and not charging, because he's in control of the situation, because he's not running into a wall every time he comes in anymore, because he created an opening for himself, an opening for his hands where he could be confident then to move forward and to pressure forward with his hands, but using the kick as an entry point. And so that worked for him. And then in terms of what kick, well, you just look at the mechanics that the student has. I teach them mechanics in terms of, well, the hook kick mechanic, the round kick mechanic, and so on. But then you're going to see, I have students, I have kids. If you look at some of the video, sometimes we post on Instagram, some of the kids, hook kick looks more round, looks more Muay Thai-ish, right, and some of them look more Savatish. Does it matter? I don't care. Once the kick does its job, see, which now takes us into a whole other discourse about the way people train today as the way we trained before, because it's interesting. For me, I thought I had discovered something new. And then when I started going back to the Old Testament, I realized that it was in the Old Testament. So I was like, shucks.
Yeah.
You know, I'm just reinventing the wheel in a sense, which was
Yeah.
when we drill hook kick, you know, when we drill defenses, hook kick defense, lift kick defense, and so on, very often the standard is inside or outside, kick the kicking leg. And in the context of fighting, and usually it's the hook kick to the kicking leg, that doesn't work within the reality of the fight situation if you look at it, particularly in terms of real world combat. Now, what I mean by that is, if you today, because of the emphasis on combat sport, we know a kick to the leg can do damage and can put a guy down if you hit the right spot, 3 inches above the knee, hit the peroneal nerve or hit the iliotibial band 3-4 times, kick to the leg can drop a guy. And a lot of the training that we do in the Junfan or JKD, whatever you want to call it, then you parry and kick the leg. Today, I suspect, and I speak subject to correction because I'm not an authority on this, I suspect 80% of the people who train inside, outside parry, kick the kicking leg, actually believe they're supposed to be kicking the leg. I don't think most of them understand or appreciate that they're actually supposed to be kicking to the groin.
Right.
You see, because of that shift that has occurred in the emphasis combat sport relative to self-defense. So you go into Junfan class, you're parrying and kicking the leg, but we're not appreciating that kick to the leg is we're doing it to the leg for safety, but in reality, that meant to be a kick to the groin. And then, excuse me, if you then take it as, oh, well, it's a kick to the groin, then you ask the question, well, when I outside parry and kick the kicking leg, well, can I kick to the groin? Because the groin isn't exposed. Well, no, yes, it is exposed, actually.
It is. Yeah.
Right? It's just that you've never trained how to access the groin as a target from that angle, from that line.
Right.
Because again, you've been so conditioned to throwing a hook kick or a round kick to the leg. So it's how do you go back now and make sure that the student understands and you teach it? Because now, am I kicking with my instep or should I be kicking with my toe? Should I be kicking with the ball of my foot if I'm going for the groin at these angles? Is it really a hook kick I should be throwing or should it be a lift kick? Or should it be an angular kick on the 45? You see, so these, you see, so now understanding the line of attack becomes more important than understanding the kick, because you can modify the kick to suit the situation.
Yeah.
Provided, of course, you understand how to use your leg at proper range. Right. So that's all a part of a parcel of it. And teaching each student, this is why I think why Bruce Lee liked to teach one-on-one, because it is difficult sometimes to convey all of this in a large group setting. And that's why sometimes you get the process, you get the mass production of the product and of a product as opposed to a process, because it's far more difficult to teach a process to masses than it is to provide a product to the masses.
So, okay, so that earlier on I thought of it because I am pretty sure it was at the end. I spent my initial 2 weeks with Sifu Dan, then I came home for a few days, and then I flew back out for another week. And I'm pretty sure that when I was getting ready to leave, he said to me something along the lines of, "You're the first person from your part of the world that has ever come out to see us. So if you really want to understand this, you got to go back home and share it with people." Right? Did he ever give you any talks like that? knowing that you had essentially replaced me as the guy from that part of the world.
With JKD, no, not that I can recall, but with stick science, with Barbadian stick fighting, yes. I remember mentioning to him the whole idea of doing a documentary and recording it, and he said, yes, Wayne, you know, he endorsed it and he encouraged me to do it because he said they won't appreciate it now, but they'll appreciate it later.
Right.
And so I remember that was the biggest. And ever since then, every time I come up to LA, usually he's like, "You guys met Wayne? That Wayne single-handedly," which I don't agree, which I don't never said, but Wayne single-handedly revised his local martial art, you know, and so on. So yeah, so he's always been encouraging me in terms of trying to preserve and promote Barbadian stick fighting. In terms of the JKD, I can't say it's specifically that, but you know, he doesn't have to, because you know, what does he say? Oh, you're one of Dwight's boys. That's all he has to say. that pretty much says it all, you know. That's it. Oh, you're one of Dwight's boys, you know.
Yeah.
So he will call him and say, "Well, let's see how the Barbadians do some brother," and that type of that's the kind of stuff he said, you know.
Yeah, and so you said that you've started to look then at, I guess, what they call the historical European martial art stuff.
Yeah, well, because I'm looking at the origins of Barbadian stick fighting, and very often there's been a strong push to convey the African influence and the whole origin of stick fighting, Barbadian stick fighting, from the African perspective. And by all means, there is, you know, and that is a strong basis of it. But there's also a European influence as well, which is sometimes often they're more dismissive of. And what I have been doing is looking at how the European influence, basically, how that blend of the African and European influence created this unique method of fighting. And because I've been doing that, it's been opening up a Pandora's box, so to speak, for me, in that the European influence is there, but then you have to look at why the European influence is what it is. And that has taken me back to Africa again. And I'm not trying to create my own narrative. So I am researching to verify information, and then present that information, and then eventually you will decide. So by that I mean, if you look at the European fencing and stick fighting methodology, up until the Renaissance period, there was a specific way in which Europeans fought. Post-Renaissance, there's a change. They've gone from double-handed sword fighting to smaller blades, more refined movement, and then they have a whole developed system of fencing, which is primarily influenced from the Italians. So in other words, most fencing, whether it is Parisian fencing, Germanic fencing, English, Spanish, if you look at it, most of those schools imported Italian fencing masters to teach. It isn't that they didn't have their own fencing styles, but for some reason they recognize Italian fencing to be the most effective and most prominent. Right. So that's where my research is taken, and the research is asking, well, why was Italian fencing so is so well reputed, and why is it everybody wanting to learn it, and what was different from it relative to what was being done in the rest of Europe? And one of the things that the research is taking me to is looking at that whole Iberian Peninsula, Portugal, Italy, Spain, to a lesser extent, France, Germany, and seeing what happened there. And if you look at the Renaissance, and well, again, I'm still researching this, so I'm speaking subject to correction. You will discover that the Moors invaded Europe and ruled Europe for, I believe it was between 400 to 900 years. And that is what catapulted the Renaissance. And that's where you start to see the change in European landscape in terms of agriculture, in terms of their buildings, and in terms of their fighting methodology. And it was the African Berbers, the Moors who came over were not Islamic Moors in terms of Arabic Moors. They were African Moors that the Muslim, the Arabs hired African Moors to invade Europe. So it was a lot of the African, a lot of these what they call Berbers, who actually were operating within that European peninsula, that what they call the Iberian Peninsula, for several hundred years. And so my question is, you know, they brought a whole host of knowledge, which led eventually, you know, to Columbus sailing around the world. Where did he get that, the maps and everything else, to be able to know that there were other lands and to sail? Well, he got that. A lot of those maps and charts came from the Arab world as a result. And irrigation in Europe, that was, again, from the Muslim influence. And so the Toledo blade, which you call the Toledo blade, is actually Damascus blade, I found out, which is also, again, taking you back to Africa. And then you have the fighting systems, I believe, African fighting systems influence the fighting methodology and the fencing. And so that's what I'm researching at this point and having to verify, because it's really interesting. I don't know if you know the book called A True and Exact History of Barbados, which was written in like 1623 or so by Robert Ligon. But it's a very, very thorough book on many different aspects of Barbadian culture at that time and life at that time. And one of his accounts is of two slaves fencing. And he says, you know, he was, to the person he was writing to, he said, you know, they were fighting in the style of, again, subject to correction, chevalier, which was actually one of the more popular fencing styles in Europe at the time. He said, if you saw these two guys fighting, they were fighting like in the school of, so these were two African slaves back in the 1600s. And the question then becomes, well, why is it that they could assimilate so well their fighting methodology within a structure that made it look so similar to European methodology? And maybe it's because they had the same root. So maybe what they were doing, maybe the art had two pathways, one through the Iberian Peninsula, through Europe to the Caribbean, and then one directly from Africa to the Caribbean. And the reason why our stick fighting is the way it is because we could see the similarity or the origin of each, which is one of the reasons why were African slaves so quickly able to ingest and assimilate Christianity. Maybe because the stories that they were being told of Christianity reminded them so much of the stories they already knew. And maybe therefore they could ingest and adopt it more easily because they knew for themselves the truth of those stories.
Right.
Because if you look at historically in the context of slavery within the New World, transatlantic slavery, who was more Christian? the slave master who would lynch and barbecue slaves, or the slave who would breastfeed the slave master's child.
Yeah.
So who demonstrated more of a Christian principle?
Okay. I gotta ask you two things. One, is there any European influence in capoeira?
To my knowledge, no, but there is Japanese influence in capoeira.
Okay.
Because Mestre Bimba took jujitsu techniques and incorporated them into capoeira, which is kind of funny because, and I probably get knocked here, especially when I say amongst jujitsu practitioners. What is the significant difference between Japanese jiu-jitsu and Brazilian jiu-jitsu?
Are you asking me?
One might say the aliveness. Now, where does that aliveness come from? The capoeira. See?
Okay.
Now, capoeiristas will admit jiu-jitsu influence in their art. I have yet to meet a Brazilian jiu-jitsu exponent who will, will give credit to capoeira being an influence to their art.
All right. Now, the other question is this. If somebody just listened to the last 10 minutes of our conversation, right, with you waxing effusively about Europeans and fencing and Berbers and Africa and Arabic influence, and then we moved on for a short period to capoeira and jiu-jitsu, Japanese jiu-jitsu and Brazilian jiu-jitsu. And they go, wait, I thought this was supposed to be a conversation about Jeet Kune Do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Somebody was to make that comment to you. What would you say to them? Would you have anything to say to them?
I would say you missed the point.
Okay, and then they go, okay, well, explain the point to me then.
What is Jeet Kune Do? It goes back. We go back to that question because Jeet Kune Do for me is being, not doing.
Right.
And what does that mean, being? Right? Because again, going back to something I said earlier, expressing myself honestly, truly, not lying to myself.
Mm-hmm.
If you understand what Jeet Kune Do is, then you can have any discussion about anything and you can find Jeet Kune Do there. Many years ago, and I'm trying to find it, I'm trying to find it, I have it on video, but I tried to find it online and I could not find it. There is an interview with Eddie Van Halen many years ago. I have it on VHS somewhere because I used to copy anything that reminded me of JKD philosophy. Mm-hmm. I would record and keep. That was me. Being here on the island, limited in access, I had to basically source anything I could find. So there is a quote, there is an interview with Eddie Van Halen when he talks about how he never learned to play the guitar formally. And he says, I never learned it from formally, never learned it from a book, because if I learn it from that book, then I'm limited to that book, to what's in that book. And I don't want to be limited. I want to basically be able to express myself. See? And for me, that was Jeet Kune Do. All right. So when I research stuff in any form, that's a part of a learning process for me. And that's a part of a process that allows me to do what? research my own experience for the truth, absorb what is useful, reject what is useless, and then add what is specifically my own. Now, I have my own view of what JKD is, and that allows me to know that I can go as far and tangentially away from what you might identify and say JKD is, and actually be more JKD than the guy who's going through every single thing he saw in Bruce Lee's Jeet Kune Do, or everything that Master Sifu, whomever taught him.
Yeah.
Because the process is about coming to a better understanding of yourself and choosing to express yourself in this way or in that way. It's one of the reasons why I took up Tai Chi Chuan. And I was like, people with Tai Chi Chuan, you're a JKD guy. Why are you learning Tai Chi? Well, very good reason. I'm getting older. One, you know.
It's time to slow down.
You know, and there's a lot of health benefit in training in the Tai Chi Chuan. But also, what was one of the first styles of martial art Bruce Lee studied and was taught? It was Tai Chi by his father. And if you read Bruce Lee's philosophy, what principles resonate constantly in Bruce Lee's philosophy of JKD? Be like water, my friend, flowing, the complementary element of yin and yang. Where do you think that comes from? You know, so why shouldn't I look into Tai Chi? And here's the interesting thing: my Tai Chi Chuan instructor is excellent. So he knows the health, but he also knows the combative side of things. And if you ever, so one of the first footwork patterns I learned going forward: advance, retreat, look right, see left, step and slide, shuffle. So I'm thinking, oh, here I was thinking that this stuff was so unique and new and fresh, but this is Tai Chi Chuan. This footwork we practice and the way we practice it. Oh, then what else does he do? Okay, step through. Then what else do he do? Okay, well, there are times in Tai Chi Chuan we like to have our back heel down, but there are other times we want to have the back heel up. Right. So now I'm going, okay, well, now I'm beginning to understand why Bruce Lee says he has not created anything new, composite or blah, 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 because JKD is not in the technical aspect. Jeet Kune Do is in the philosophical and the principle. If you can understand that, then you can transcend technique. And therefore, you can pull technique from anywhere once it satisfies the principle and the philosophy. You see? And sometimes you don't know what you have until you go outside of it.
Outside of it. Right.
So you don't know how good your Jeet Kune Do is if you stay in this bubble. You see, which is one of the problems that we have today, because, and I blame us for it. I don't blame Sifu Dan for this, because he constantly tells you to go outside, go for a look here. Yeah. You know, I was asking him at one point about spear technique and stuff. He says, Wayne, there's so-and-so in LA down 2 hours drive from here. You should go visit him, and blah, 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 blah. So it isn't that he's hoarding the knowledge. It isn't that he wants you to stay in a bubble, but very often we put ourselves in our own prisons. We create our own prisons for ourselves, and we're so comfortable in there that we think that we're free. And that can happen very often with us in Jeet Kune Do. We can get so used to what we do and doing it with people like us, and we're critical of the other styles and the other systems of doing that, and we fall into the same trap ourselves of limiting ourselves to just this thing we think Jeet Kune Do is. So if you're not doing the 1964 material, or you're not doing the 1967 material or whatever, then you're not doing Jeet Kune Do.
Right.
But if you
I remember
sorry,
when I used to be critical of our good friends from Marine House, right, back in the day, until I heard about their summer training where they used to be in the horse stance until they pass out doing reverse punches, right? I was like, shoot, I ain't never done that. So I think there might be something to the way these maniacs train.
Yeah, I mean there is a lot. Sometimes when you're on the outside looking in, the vision can be your vision can be clouded, and sometimes you have to go through the experiences. You know, there is something I learned years ago when doing chemistry at school, which was that no reaction is an important result. So sometimes you try stuff and you come out of it saying, nah, that's not for me. But the actual process of going through the experience was valuable.
Right.
You know, this is not to say that you know something. It's not like I'm going to go drink poison and then go to the hospital and die, you know, and be in the hospital for months to go, oh no, drinking poison isn't good for me, you know.
Yeah.
But there's some things that you have to experiment with before you can knock it. And there are some things you want to try, because what is one of the important elements of Jeet Kune Do? Efficiency. So we should constantly be asking ourselves, is there a better way? And if the answer is no, then we keep doing what we're doing. But if the answer is yes, then we should be willing to adapt, to change. But we will not know if something out there is more efficient, or if something out there is better than what we have, if we don't go looking.
If you don't keep really looking.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wayne, if you weren't doing this, might you have been a philosophy professor at Cave Hill campus?
Possibly, or a historian of some sort.
Yeah.
You know, possibly. Like I said, I loved history, and I do love philosophy as well. So it's very possible that that might have been the vein in which, although at one point I wanted to be an architectural engineer, I like the idea of making and building things. But in terms of what comes easiest to me, history and grasping the philosophy behind things, again, the idea behind something, why this works this way, why this person might have thought that way. That's always been it.
Did you go to UE after A levels?
For 2 years, I went twice. I did a year, dropped out, went back, did another year, and dropped out again, because it just wasn't for me. And not that, that I have anything against learning. It was that the options were not there. I was doing it to be doing it, as opposed to doing it because there was something I wanted to do. The programs that were being offered there were not really of any interest to me. It was just the thing to do. So I went and then I did it. It wasn't that I failed, right? I passed most of the exams I passed, and that was in many cases without reading the books. No, honestly, because I would go to the tutorials and I listened to the lecturers, and that was my thing. You know, I always found it more interesting to listen to what lecturers had to say than to sit and read the draft text. Economics is not that sexy. But yeah, I went, I did it, and it was like, and then it became, well, if I can pass most of the exams without actually having to read the text and study, then for one thing, you know, the living experience was more relevant, because at that time I was also in sales. I was a sales rep for a company, and I was living the economics. You know, supply and demand and sales law and pricing, you know how to price for the market. And that was stuff I was actually living. And to me, the living experience was more relevant than the theoretical experience. And that's always been the case for me. I like to experience it. So in terms of martial art, even that's it. I don't want you to tell me about this technique, that if you do this and if you hit here and do this, that, you know, the guy's heart is going to shatter and blah. No, don't tell me about it. I want to experience it. You know, I don't want to die experiencing it, but I want to get a sense of, if you say this punch is effective, well then show me, let me experience, let me hit me in my chest and let me feel that punch to know that, yeah, that punch actually is more effective than this thing I'm doing or whatever. And for me, that's always been it. The experience is always more important, relevant than the theory.
I want to ask you about the, I guess big fish in small pond analogy would work. But before I do that, okay, so here's another historical context. I recall that I said to you at some point, I recall that I used to say, but maybe this was in Miami and not in Barbados. Did I ever say anything about if Madonna came looking for me, I would be gone? Did I ever say that?
I cannot remember those
Okay.
specific words, but I always remember before you left, a couple of months before you left, you always alluding to, if something happened to you, what would I do? You know, and
Okay,
that
so
was kind of like your preparation to let me know that you were leaving indirectly and that I needed to really get myself mentally and physically in order.
so I never actually said, okay, look, I have this much time left and then I'm moving to Miami. I never said that.
Probably a couple of weeks before you left, but not a couple of months
Oh,
before you left. But it was always like,
wow.
well, Wayne, because it was always about a notebook. Wayne, get your notebook. Let me see your notebook. Are you taking notes? Blah blah blah. What happened? What would happen if I died? Blah, you know. And it was only a couple of, yeah. I mean, I have my first notebook here somewhere around. It was only a couple of, no, my second notebook. I can't find my first. My first was a regular school book.
Oh, a rough notebook.
Yes, a rough notebook. That was my first, and somehow that disappeared. But I had bought a hardback book, which was the second one, and I started taking notes diligently once I realized after you told me you were going, and I'm really annoyed that I lost the first one, because the first one you actually made handwritten notes in there. You actually read that notebook and you made written notes on it.
Okay.
So I would have loved to have kept that. Yeah.
This is my French exercises from lower six, right? Now, the thing about it is that, so that first page at page 2 and page 3 is French, right? Everything else is martial art. Everything else is martial art. Oh my God. You probably, the light probably won't let you read this. Can you read that? This thing here.
No, it's a little too blurred.
It is G. Joseph, care of Dao Chuan Fa Kung Fu Club, 32 Irish Avenue, Apartment 3, Coelho Flats, Glencoe. Wait till I show him this.
Oh well, goes to show the small world.
Great, right? This book must have gone to Trinidad because it's in his handwriting. It's in somebody's handwriting. Right?
Yeah.
I gotta ask him about that. Yeah. So
that's from back in '85, not '86. Sorry, because I remember when you went to Trinidad in '86 for Sifu Dan's demo there. I have that video. I think you have that video too.
No.
No, I gave you a copy.
I know, but that video is on one of the infamous hard drives that crashed,
Oh dear.
right?
But I
Now,
have the VHS and I have to convert it at some point to DVD, provided it isn't damaged from,
I
you know,
know.
for
Yeah.
so long. I have so much video VHS to try to transfer it
A lot
to
of my,
DVD.
fortunately for me, my storage unit is air conditioned. So I
Mhm.
think that a lot of my VHS will be okay. Talking about video, now the other thing, were we ever able to locate the video of the cultural center event?
85, no. I've never seen anybody or come across anybody who has it.
Okay,
I've
but it
asked.
does exist, right?
I do not know. I
I think it
suspect
does.
it. I suspect it should,
I
but
think
I
it
do
does.
not know for sure.
Okay,
But
because here's what I remember.
nobody have asked so far seems to have it or be aware of it.
Yeah, I
I
remember
have
them
pictures. I have
doing.
lots of photographs from it, not just photos from you. I have the actual negatives from one photographer. I just only developed the only two sets. Actually, no, I developed quite a bit of them, but I only really kept the ones with you and Barbadian stick fighting or Bajan stick licking. I've kept those ones, but I have a whole series. I have the negatives with a whole for all the demonstrations, pretty much all the
Okay.
demonstrations.
Yeah, because one time I saw something on CBC about martial arts,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it was a thing on the Shotokan people, and it talked about how Shotokan doesn't do weaponry, and they showed a few seconds
Mm-hmm.
of this brown arm reaching into a black bag and pulling sticks out, and I go, "That's my arm," and it was from
Well,
that demo.
the problem with CBC is, unfortunately, that they don't necessarily archive all their material. Um, I will not. This is video, and this will be recorded, so I won't go into the details of that. But there's a reputation of material being recorded over
Oh yeah, yeah.
and reused. So a
Well,
lot of stuff can be
you
lost.
worked for CBC. You did self-defense stuff for CBC for a couple of years, right?
Yeah, I can't remember which years it was, but several years ago I did there was a program called Chat Room, and then there's the Morning Barbados. I think Morning Barbados still goes on now. And I was asked to come on and do a segment on self-defense, so or martial arts / self-defense. So yeah, for
Right.
at least a season, I did some work with them, some demos. I bring in expose different types of martial arts on the island, and showed martial arts, from a fitness perspective, from a self-defense perspective. That it went along. Actually, they still today, a lot of that stuff is still rebroadcast. So I have people still stopping me. Oh, they saw me, yes, and I'm thinking, well, this thing was years ago, but it's that they're still rebroadcasting the material.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. I was trying. There was another picture I was trying to put up, but I couldn't find it. And it was, I think it was in 2014 when I came home for 2 days. I think I flew in on Christmas Eve, and then I left, I think, the 11 p.m. flight on Christmas night, if I remember correctly, right? But I took a picture of your, no, wait. Did you train in 2 different spots with me or just one? Can you remember?
2. On top of
At the
Rendezvous
top of the
Hill
Rendezvous Hill
and at the bottom.
and then Rendezvous Gardens. Okay,
Yeah.
right. Okay, yeah, that's what I thought. But so you didn't train in the first Rendezvous Gardens location, the one where I have that the old
We
high
do
hook kick.
side kick or hook kick or something.
Oh,
And
yeah.
a very slim trim you.
Yeah. So, okay. So what's the plan for 2023? Anything, just keep doing what you're doing, but improve on it, or is there anything major? Because I
Well,
looked at all the media stuff, all the media pieces that you guys have put out, and you keep really busy with special events, don't you?
we try.
Yeah.
The level of success, is varies. It's a hit or miss thing. So we have periods where people are very interested and active, and then the other periods where, you know, it
Mhm.
it doesn't quite bite. The seminar context is not as effective, at least locally, as before. People aren't as attracted to seminars as before. So with morsels, there's a whole other discussion about the attention span of individuals today and the learning and assimilation of information. Basically, morsels. You have to give people in small bites. So we've been doing shorter 1 to 2 hour workshops, and that's what we're hoping to do or planning to do for this coming year. That tends to work better now than an 8-hour, 10-hour seminar.
What is what's the national self-defense state of mind?
Right now, from my perspective, and I only can speak from my perspective, I think most people are on one or two extremes. They've either, as I like to say, surrendered their protection to a external party,
Mhm.
or they have no confidence in being able to effectively defend themselves. And by that I mean the gun culture is becoming so prevalent that, there's a lot of people being shot and killed by gun now, a lot more so than previously. And so a lot of the mindset is, well, why learn to defend myself in a martial art context when people are shooting? And then the other side of it is, well, we are going to rely on the technology. We're going to hire security guards, and we're going to put up cameras, security cameras and stuff. And this is what's going to protect us.
Right.
And nobody seems to realize that there is a need to fill that in between. Because their reliance on, well, I will get a gun too. I always ask people, what happens up until the point you get that gun? What happens up to the point the person draws that gun? Are you just gonna, does the gun just magically appear in the person's hand?
Right.
Well,
what's the gun laws in Barbados? There's no personal carry, right?
No, Barbados laws haven't changed that much. You have to apply for a gun license, and usually only certain people will get that gun license. And then you're only allowed to, you have controls on terms of how you can carry it, where you can carry it, how much ammunition you can have, and so on.
Right.
And it's really funny because there's so many instances that I can convey of people who got robbed and had their weapon on them and never had the opportunity to draw it. because a lot of time folks are miss the point, right? Firearm training is so essential. If you're talking about real world combat, you have to know how to use a firearm. But you cannot rely totally on that firearm because you still have to access it. And then the other side of it is, people are confident, well, if my cameras are up, if I see something, I'll call the police or I'll call and whatever. But again, they don't seem to factor in the time it takes, how long it takes for the police to arrive or for the security company to arrive when that alarm is triggered, and how badly things can go wrong within that frame of time. So the mindset is very often that a lot of people are of the view that martial skills are obsolete, when indeed they are far from it. It is just a question of the context, again, in how you use those martial skills. Like apparently a lot of people don't know that Bruce Lee was a quick draw. He did firearm training, and I mean, again, it's so funny. There's nothing that you can think of combatively that Bruce Lee does not address. And he's very honest about it again. And to the dragon, what's the first thing he asks? Again, why does it 45? Why doesn't somebody just go up there and bang, settle it? That's the first question he asks in the movie, So he's never been unrealistic about what and when the martial arts can be used, you see. But somehow we tend to think that martial arts does not recognize or appreciate that there are times where the physical skills alone may not be the most useful skill. And
right.
We don't always appreciate that the physical skills also can enhance the other skills as well. Because if you can prevent that guy from drawing his weapon by controlling and striking, maybe you can stop him from pulling the weapon and shooting you. If you can keep that guy off of you with an eye jab so you can draw your weapon and fire, maybe that could save your life. So it's, again, re-educating, because a lot of it is a re-education process of re-educating people to the usefulness and the function still of combative skills, unarmed combative skills. That's one of the things that we have to be able to do. And you have to make it function. It has to be functional, relevant, and at the same time sexy. Because if you can't keep their attention, for that 15 seconds, they're gone somewhere else.
Right. What about kickboxing and boxing competitions, and that was that stuff put on hold during COVID?
Because of COVID, it was martial arts had a very, very difficult time during COVID. It was almost as though we were being penalized in many ways, because we were the first to be closed, all contact activity had to cease, and we were the last to be allowed to resume, to get back into action. And there was, while the government was doing this, there was practically no financial compensation from government for closing down, And I think, again, a part of it was the culture and the ignorance of the people in authority, because I don't think many of them saw martial arts as a profession. So I think many of them viewed it as, this was something you did after your regular job. So we didn't really need to consider that there are people who would be out of work, And then they were so ignorant of martial arts that the first mandate they had was that all martial arts were banned except for Tai Chi. I mean, literally, this was in the emergency mandate that came down in writing.
Really?
That you no martial art could be practiced except Tai Chi. And you know why? Because some smart person
Position Tai
visualized
Chi.
Tai Chi as a bunch of
Right.
people in the park, distance,
Yep.
going through these movements on their own. You see?
Yep.
So that was okay during COVID. But the other stuff was too close contact, and too risky. So I had to write a whole article and do a whole bunch of lobbying to get that changed. For them to facilitate and allow martial arts to resume.
Nice. I suspect then that, okay, let me ask you these two things and then let's wrap this up. My recollection again was we had in the old days 6 opportunities, 6 maybe weekly or bi-weekly or whatever opportunities to watch Kung Fu films, because there were double features at the Globe, at the Plaza, and at Empire. That's how I remember it.
Yeah, well, by the time I could go to the cinema, it was still pretty much that, except that the Empire had been closed by that time. So you had the Olympic Cinema, you had the Globe Cinema, and you had the Plaza. But the Plaza tended to have the best Kung Fu movies. That was really the place to go.
I think you're right. Yeah. What was the Olympic is the one closer to town, right? Like
that was behind the Parliament buildings.
Right. Like close to Roebuck Street or what have you.
Yes.
Okay. Now, what was the name of the cinema outside of town, up in Eagle Hall? Was it?
Eagle Hall? No.
No, not Eagle Hall.
Actually, the Roxy. Because in doing my research on stick science, that was one of the locations where stick fighting competitions were held. So it's now a supermarket. So I went to the supermarket to see if I could get any old pictures of the Roxy. And the only thing they had was a painting that somebody had done in the 80s. And the painting
where was the Roxy?
The Roxy is basically on the corner of Eagle Hall and Black Rock Main Road and Eagle Hall. That intersection.
I still know my town.
Yeah. So I have a actual painting that has the Roxy, and on there in the painting there are billboards for movies. So that's how I knew it was a cinema at one point.
Okay.
Because I never knew that up until that point. I always thought it was a performance facility, but not a cinema. But it turns out it was a cinema at one point.
Have they knocked down the old Empire building, or it's still up?
No, that's still up, and I think they're planning to do something with it now.
Yeah.
But
8 years ago, they were planning to do something with it.
Well, so I heard. They have done stuff with the environments. Where the plaza used to be, now that is a whole cultural area that they've developed. I can't remember what it's called right now. And Independence Square, they've developed that as well as heroes, as a kind of like a hero square. So I know they're planning to do something with the Empire, but I don't know what. I can't remember what, and I don't think they've started on it yet.
Do kids nowadays in Barbados know anything about the Vista cinema or Rudolph's Drive-In, or what was the other drive-in? It became the Globe Drive-In, but it wasn't originally the Globe.
Was it Olympus? I think that might have been the Olympus Drive-In at one point. No, was it Olympus?
No, it wasn't Olympus. The Vista Cinema was in Hastings, right?
Yes, the Vista. I remember. Right? Vista was. I only went there once. I ever went there once, I think.
Do you remember what you watched? I can tell you exactly. I mean, I went there more than once, but I tell you what I watched there.
It might have been Mighty Joe Young or something along that line.
I watched Jaws at the Vista.
Yeah.
I remember I watched Jaws at the Vista. And it was there was I think it was called Rudo's Drive-In, which is up by Regency Park.
Yeah, but that's the Globe Drive-In now, I think. I'm pretty sure that's now the Globe Drive-In.
But
Because
so
we only ever had one drive-in as far as I remember.
no, there was two. There was another one which was down in the area when you come down from Sheraton Park and you make that left turn by where used to be the Intel building.
Yeah, that's
right?
the Globe Drive-In. I thought that was what you meant. That's the only one I know of.
I seem to remember it being in that area, but it wasn't originally called Globe because there was just the Globe Cinema.
Yeah.
Over by Harson College and what have you. Yeah. Huh. All right. So, well, as usual, you got your work cut out for you.
Yeah.
You know.
What's new? You know.
Exactly.
It's just working hard, trying to make the business making it more of a business and focus on the business side of it so that it's financially, you know, the financial side of it is there because I'm not getting any younger. So, you know, teaching for the love of teaching can't be just it. You know, there must be some degree of security, financial security.
I noticed what you got going on there. You know, there's a thing called touch of gray, you know.
Nah, I'm a purist.
So
I'm a purist.
With that? Okay.
And when it gets cut, because I'm overdue for a haircut right now. My barber is on vacation. You don't see it only becomes like one patch when it's low. You know, so I'm not too worried about that.
Yeah.
But continue to push. Now, you know, now that we're coming out of COVID, we're gonna revive the kickboxing is gonna pick back up. Muay Thai. Hopefully we might have Ajahn Chai here later in the year. We're doing
bringing him now for how many years?
Ooh, that's a good question. Over 10 for sure. 17, 18, 19, 20. Up until COVID hit, we had him here in 2019. And then obviously since then, but he wants to be here. And we've actually started one of our tournaments here to honor him, which we call the President's Cup. And so we're hoping to do that later in the year, have him here for that and have that tournament. We usually get a good response to the tournament in terms of participants. We get guys from England, Canada, US who want to come in to compete on that card. So hoping to build that up. And now that Muay Thai is an Olympic sport, kickboxing is an Olympic sport now. Hopefully that is going to open some doors in terms of greater governmental support. So, and apparently the National Cultural Foundation now is also trying to revive stick licking. So we'll see how that impacts on that particular martial discipline.
And what generally speaking, what martial arts are available on the island now? Shotokan is still there, I'm sure.
Yeah, Shotokan, American Kempo, Universal Kempo is still here. Taekwondo, Judo, Sanuki Jiu-Jitsu is still here. Most recently, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. We have a 4th degree black belt now here on the island, teaching Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Wushu is still here. Tai Chi Chuan, Wing Chun is still here. Wrestling is now, that's also Olympic sport, and that's been reintroduced in a sense. I have to say reintroduced because again, in 1620, whatever, Livon spoke of the slaves wrestling. So that's been a part of the tradition for a very long time.
Yeah.
Boxing,
Do you
of
remember?
course.
Do you remember Maxi Baldeo and the Kyokushin guys?
I remember Maxi Baldeo not as a martial artist, but as a musician, and
Okay.
having music and Echo Store. But I remember somebody mentioning to me that he did martial arts at some point.
Yeah. Yeah. Maxi went to school with my brother Daryl,
Yeah.
and so he came by. He came by the original rendezvous location, that backyard.
Yeah. Okay.
A couple
Well,
of
there
times. Yeah.
recently was a revival, because a reintroduction of Kyokushin recently. There is Sensei Harl Oxley, and I don't know if you remember the Chews, or I think Chews or the Chos or the Chois, depending on who you're speaking to.
Mhm.
But he was one of the original persons who was involved in Kyokushin here. Then he moved to the United States, but his family has a lot of businesses here. And maybe 8, you know me in time, between 5 and 10 years ago,
Yeah.
he came back, and one of his guys, Harold Oxley, started teaching Kyokushin here again. And they actually had a tournament a couple of years after, where a lot of competitors from Miami and so on came down and participated. But it's not, I don't think it's quite caught on, which is kind of funny, because for me, Kyokushinkai is one of the more functional, for one of the better, or practical karate systems there is out there. But it hasn't quite really gotten traction.
It's not sexy enough.
No, you see, because guys kicking you in the legs and
Yeah.
stuff
It's
is
not sexy.
not sexy.
But
So
yeah, if they had them sexy shorts that Thai boxing has, then
and maybe who knows? But yeah, the white pants, the long white pants kicking to
right.
the leg. You don't really
Yeah.
appreciate it. You
That
can't
don't
see the
cut it.
red in it, how the legs start to
That
red
don't
and
cut it.
purple.
Yeah. Listen, is Miss Petal nearby? She could come say hello and goodbye. Where is she?
I don't know. She says she's not suited for the camera.
Okay. All right.
I see,
Well,
so I can still say hi.
okay.
But you should.
You can hear me, but I'm in cleaning clothes.
Alrighty. All
Happy
right,
New
my dear.
Year.
You too, honey.
So yeah,
All right.
she's been here all along, whispering in my ear, commenting on everything you were saying and asking. Just totally distracting me at some
Okay.
points. But
Oh wait,
yeah,
I just
she's been
okay.
there.
This is the true last question. Alex Huisman, I wanted to know from you, what's the worst thing? Shoot, I didn't write it down. What's the worst thing that you learned from me, or what was the worst experience you had training with me?
Okay. The worst experience I had with you was the punch to my gut that I
I
got.
hit you.
Yes, and
Why?
brought with tears to my eyes. I cannot remember. You were teaching something, and apparently I was not getting it, and you got frustrated, and I got a chin choy to my gut that folded me over, and then I
That
got a
doesn't
lecture.
sound like me.
Then I got a lecture from you. You must remember. You must remember that when I trained with you, you were a student teacher.
Right.
So
Yeah. Well,
your,
that's a lot of frustration right there.
your students who meet you now are meeting the best of you, the refined you. But back then you were doing what I had to do. You were learning to teach.
Yeah.
And you were using teaching as a method of learning yourself.
Right.
Because again,
Yep,
you
very
had to
true.
get people up to your level to be able to push yourself further.
Very
So
true.
that is a frustrating experience in itself. And sometimes you can't always get your point across in the way you want to get it across.
Yeah.
Like, so that was probably the most painful. The second was verbal, when
What
you
happened
said to
then?
me, you had said to me that I gave you that I seem to want to be one of those kids who was in the back of the class, you know, just happy to say that they were there, just happy to be there, but not really applying myself.
Wow.
Something along that line.
Really?
And I was like, gosh, I gotta prove you wrong. And
Oh my God.
so I have stuck around just to prove you wrong, apparently.
Right. Yeah.
Because I'm still, you know,
You're still around.
38 years later, I'm still here.
Yeah, we're going on 38 years. So I realized only a couple of days ago, this is my 40th year. This is my 40th anniversary with Sifudan.
Congratulations. You know, a lot of people can't say that.
Yeah. Oh, I just found it. He says, ask him what he hated most about training under you. That's what Alex wanted to
What I
know.
hated most
What you
was
hated
the
most.
Thai training at the time with the perma-built Thai pads. Because again, you were a student teacher at that point in time, and those perma-built pads were so heavy, and you made me keep them up for the entire 3-minute round. I could not put my hands down. I remember that, and it made me hate Muay Thai at that point. I only really started to love Muay Thai when you left, after you left, and when I came to Miami to visit. And then by then you had mellowed, you see, and then I fell in love with Muay Thai. Up until then, I did it because we used it for conditioning.
Yep.
That has always been, that was one of the main reasons JKD people used Muay Thai at the time as a conditioning method.
That was that was the thing.
You know.
That was white, right? Yeah, man. Was it the black ones, the blue ones, or the red ones?
The red ones. It's a pair of red perma-built Thai pads. At 16, you had me up there holding it. Those things felt like they were like 20, 30 pounds each.
Yeah.
They may not have been, but it felt like that to me.
That was old school, man.
Yeah.
That was old school. Damn. Right. Anyhow. All right. Well, thank you very much again. I hope you get rid of that cough very, very quickly. And I wish you all the best for 2023. And like I said at the start, I promise I will do a much better job of staying in touch.
Responding to my messages, yes. Yes, I will appreciate that. But you know, that's life. I myself am very negligent in that regard too, you know. But the good news is when you are in sync with people, you may not see them for a long time, but when you meet with them, it's like you were just talking to each other yesterday. And there are two people in my life who I'm very much like that with. Yourself and my best friend. You know, we may not speak for a year or years, but when we get together, it's like, oh, that was yesterday. We were just here together yesterday. That's what it feels like.
Then I'm in good company.
Yes, you are. You were both at my wedding, so you know.
All right. Okay. All right. I gotta run. Thanks again, man.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Sifu, for having me. All the best for the new year.
All right. Take care.
Okay.
All right. That's my boy. And that was episode number, where are we? 251 of the Jeet Kune Do Dialogues. So I'll ask Wayne to take a look at any comments that you guys might have made, and if there's anything that we need to talk about, we'll do that. And that's it. I'm pretty sure Mahipalunia is on with me next week. I'm pretty sure. I just gotta confirm that. So you guys know the deal. Follow me on Twitter at Dwight Woods, on Instagram at Dwight D Woods. If you want to support this show, please visit jkdrebel.com. Click on that's the wrong one, Dwight. Click on so this is paypal.me/unified MA Miami, the Jeet Kune Do Journey Volume 1, paypal.me/unified MA Miami. And if you want to support the show, visit jkdrebel.com, click on the Rebel Gear link. I decided in January I'll still feature this, one of my favorite designs, the UMAA Kali JKD t-shirt, jkdrebel.com, click on the Rebel Gear link. All right. But of course, the best thing you can do is to spread the word about the Jeet Kune Do Dialogue. Share this video, like, subscribe, follow over on the YouTube, all that good stuff. All right. Okay, so that's it for this week. Until the next episode, this is Dwight Woods, the Jeet Kune Do Rebel, signing off. You guys have a great weekend. Stay safe. Talk soon. Take care.
Inward crescent to spinning crescent, back, hook kick, cross, hook, cross, hook kick.